Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
As the Reverend I Am Jolly used to say, Happy New Year, I suppose. Only joking. Happy New Year to each and every one of you. 2025. Let's meet it with optimism and determination. That's what I'm going to do. I'm asking you to do the same. It's never over until it's over. There are no final victories and no final defeats. We are back in the fray in 2025 with this live special New Year's Day edition of the mother of all talk shows. You better fasten your seatbelts though. It's going to be a bumpy night. That I can promise you. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Older viewers may remember, it is more than 10 years ago when I asked the then British Prime Minister, David Cameron, my goodness, how many we've had since then. I asked David Cameron in Parliament at Prime Minister's Question Time if he had read Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein, and if he had he read it to the end? Answer came there none, but all subsequent Prime Ministers and him have made it clear they either didn't read it or they didn't read it to the end. The end being the point at which, having carefully assembled a monster, Dr. Frankenstein discovered that it was no longer under his control, and that's why they call it a monster. I refer, obviously, to the horrific events that began the 3:15 a.m. New Year's morning in the United States of America, in the great city of New Orleans, of which I have fond memories. At 3:15 a.m., Shamsuddin, yes, that was his name. He is a former U.S. serviceman. Shamsuddin Jabbar, that was his name. Flying the black flags of ISIS, murdered 10 innocent revelers in New Orleans, celebrating New Year, and they didn't even get to see the sun rise on 2025. 10 dead, dozens wounded. And then Shamsuddin Jabbar got out of his pickup truck, armed to the teeth, and with an IED inside his vehicle alongside the black flag of ISIS. And he opened fire on law enforcement, which skillfully and bravely took him down. But there are more conspirators involved. It's believed 4 or 5 co-conspirators of ISIS are at large in the French Quarter of New Orleans, where other IEDs have been discovered. The monster is called a monster for a reason. And the reason I'm laboring this point is surely obvious, even to the thickest skulls in Western capitals. You cannot play with the terrorist monster. You cannot expect it to stay in the area of operations that you have licensed it to, armed it to, funded it to, proselytized for it to, propagandized for it to. For all of that is exactly what we have done. And we didn't just do it in Syria in the last few weeks, in the last few years. We did it in country after country after country. We did it against President Nasser in Egypt. We founded the so-called Muslim Brotherhood in the 1920s in Egypt with the purpose of undermining Arab unity, Arab national unity. And ultimately, we used that Muslim Brotherhood to try to subvert, undermine, and if possible, bring down the great Gamal Abdel Nasser, the greatest Arab leader of modern times. And we did it in Palestine, in Gaza, to undermine and weaken, and if possible, bring down my friend, the late President Arafat. And we did it in Afghanistan. This is something the Americans have now wiped from their collective memory. The reason there was a Taliban in the first place was that the recently departed and apparently saintly James L. Carter and Zbigniew Brzezinski, his Secretary of State, created what became the Taliban, the so-called Mujahideen. And we armed them, funded them, proselytized for them. Sandy Gall, every single night on News at 10, on ITN television in Britain, used to talk about these gallant, heroic, holy warriors, Mujahideen. And how did that end? They succeeded, of course. They defeated the Soviet-backed government. They brutalized in ISIS fashion the president of Afghanistan. They hanged him from a lamppost. They stuffed American dollars in his mouth somewhat incongruously, along with the penis that they had cut off from his body. Najibullah was a friend of mine, full disclosure, and his demise will never leave me. And I knew then, if I did not know before, that the mutilations, head chopping, obscurantism, imprisoning of women, the blowing up of religious and historic artifacts was to be the calling card of that type of people everywhere in the world that the empire found a temporary use for them. So let me say this in parenthesis to Miss Halima Khan and to Five Pillars. If you have any sympathy with these kind of people, stay away from us. We want nothing to do with you. And we're sorry that we ever had. The reality is, this barbarism, this mutilating, heart-eating barbarism is a curse on the Muslims. It's a curse on humanity. And those who support it are placing themselves beyond the pale of human civilization. And no one should have anything to do with any of them. But let me close the parenthesis and move on to a more significant point. We have just put ISIS and Al-Qaeda in control of the Mediterranean country of Syria, in the ancient Arab and Muslim capital of Damascus, the Umayyad Mosque, where John the Baptist's head is entombed, is now controlled by ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Now, you can put lipstick on a pig. You can even tie a Windsor knot on a necktie and put it round the neck of the former deputy leader of Al-Qaeda and the former deputy leader of ISIS. You can put him in a suit. You can put him in a tie. You can put him in a tutu. You can put him in a onesie, but he will always be the man who led al-Zarqawi's murder gang in Iraq and al-Baghdadi's murder gang in Syria. Now, Western leaders thought they were being clever. We'll use these people. We'll use them to get rid of the Syrian regime that we hate. We'll improve Israel's security, though perhaps only temporarily. We will destroy the remnants of Nasser's Arab nationalist movement. We'll put these obscurantists in power who've just appointed a minister for women who's Turkish and who has made it plain that the life of women and girls in Syria is going to look much more like the women and girls in Afghanistan henceforth. You can put the military commander of ISIS into one of the top generals' positions in the new Syrian armed forces. You can do these things, but don't expect that the end result will be any different to what happened in New Orleans at 3:15 this morning. Don't expect that you can control the monster that Frankenstein himself could not control. Because this nihilistic murder cult, death cult, has global ambitions, you know. They're not interested in the borders of the former Syrian Arab Republic any more than they were interested in the borders of Afghanistan. Twin Towers, anybody? Afghanistan, Tora Bora, 9/11. Do any of you Americans even remember these things? You've played with these people before. You've heroized these people before. You've armed them, funded them, covered your august journals with paeans of praise to them. You've done all this before, and now it's come back to bite you again in New Orleans. I love New Orleans, by the way. It's one of the reasons I'm so passionate in this monologue this evening. The thought of what happened there this morning is almost too much for me to bear. And I don't know how Americans can bear it. I really don't know. Now, this jabber, he's not an immigrant, not an illegal immigrant. He didn't come from Bangladesh or Yemen. He was born and raised in Beaumont, Texas. He served 10 years with the American Armed Forces. He even appeared on videos on YouTube in his capacity as an IT expert. I've just been watching him. Looks like an everyday, ordinary guy. But in his heart, in the recesses of his mind, he had been touched by the global ambitions of this death cult called ISIS, called Al-Qaeda, called anything you like. It's an alphabet soup, but it all spells fanatic, takfiri extremism, who, when they're not murdering fellow Muslims, including fellow Muslims from their own majority current of Islam, are murdering Muslims of other stripes. When they're not murdering Christians in Malula and in the valley of the Christians, when they're not murdering Alawites for no other reason than they are Alawites, when they are not cutting the heads off their own people, they're planning to murder you. planning to cut your head off, coming to a Christmas market near you, coming to a New Year celebration near you. Now, don't say I didn't warn you. I told you over and over and over again. I told William Hague in a trapped lift inside Parliament when he had just returned from Jordan, where he had promised what turned out to be massive expenditure of British taxpayers' money to the head choppers and throat cutters who are in control in Syria now, although not necessarily for the long term. I said to him, why are you sharpening the knives of people who may end up here in this building? As indeed they subsequently did. Thanks to a brave policeman, PC Keith Fletcher. They didn't get past the gate, but they murdered him. But if they had got past the gate, and if they'd gotten into the corridors of Westminster, trust me, they would have been just as happy using the knife sharpened by William Hague on William Hague himself. They murdered one of my colleagues, a fine, devout Christian man, Sir David Amos, Member of Parliament. They murdered him. They stabbed him 60, 70 times in his parliamentary surgery. These people don't care who they murder. They live to murder. Their purpose is murder. Murder and mayhem. It's like a devil dog, you know. You think it's your pet devil dog. But if you leave your small child in a room with it, your pet devil dog will murder it. And so I make this plea, even at this well past midnight, to the Western public, for I have no faith whatsoever in the Western leaders or their media. To the Western public, demand that your leaders stop feeding this beast of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the other organizations like it. These are all the consequences of Western decision-making over decades. Syria is only the latest chapter. What Donald Trump's going to do now, he'll have to think carefully, because there's thousands and thousands of foreign fighters in Syria. If he now attacks it, the quadrant where these people are, it will be the equivalent of smashing a hornet's nest. If he moves in to smash it, they will scatter everywhere. First around the region, and then around the world. There's a saying for all of this. In normal life, that normal, non-political people understand. Be careful what you wish for, because you might just get it. We've got Professor Seyed Marandi from the University of Tehran coming up now, I'm sure, to tell you some of the same from a different perspective. Stay tuned. This is the mother of all talk shows.
There's a group of people in Twitter who are daily posting discussions about Gaza, Lebanon, what's happening, news updates, aid for Gaza, and trying to enlist the help of Jordan and France and any other regional entity that will help get more aid into Gaza and all of Palestine, for everyone who suffers. So I want to request that everyone who is listening to this go to your local council meetings and peacefully request that their representatives at the local levels do this, because it works.
Thanks for the call, Pia, in Uruguay. I'm a free man of the city of San Francisco, awarded to me for my work on Palestine, on the steps of City Hall itself. So it was a particular delight for me that the San Francisco Council voted by 8 votes to 3 to demand a ceasefire. And that decision didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of campaigning to force the local authority representatives to vote.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So we always have a poll, and tonight is no different. Who is MOATS Person of the Year? Who is the mother of all talk shows Person of the Year? There were many that we could have included as a choice, but as you'll see from the numbers of this poll, less than 20,000, just less than 20,000 so far. The more options you give, algorithmically, the fewer people are offered viewing of the poll in this new age of internet freedom presided over by you-know-who. So we restricted it to 3. We probably should have restricted it to 2, but I'm interested and glad that we did make it 3. The choices are Donald Trump, Syed Hassan Nasrallah, or Vladimir Putin. I was pretty sure that it would be fought out between Trump and Hassan Nasrallah. But to my amazement, so far, Vladimir Putin is winning it very comfortably indeed. But you can have your say now on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. So far, 18,904 people have voted. So get voting between now and the end of the show. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 08081 965522. And the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. So, I did promise you, Professor Seyed Marandi, Chair of American Studies at the University of Tehran. And I'm glad to say he joins us now. Professor, there's much to talk about in the region, but let's talk about your other speciality, America, first and foremost. I don't know if you heard my monologue, but in short, I was making the obvious point. I call it an obvious point, but a very large number of people seem to have missed it, that ISIS and Al-Qaeda have been, if they were not created by the West, and there may be an argument that they were, they have certainly been regularly and across the globe used by the West, only to discover yet again this day that the monster will turn on its owner, its patron, anytime it likes. Have I got that right?
I agree with you 100%. The United States, if they did not actually create ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and I think there's good reason to believe that they did, or at least they created it alongside their allies, then they strengthened them, whether in Afghanistan or in Syria or in Libya or in Yemen or elsewhere. They played a key role. And when they create the monster, just like the monster of Frankenstein, they lose control. And I don't know the circumstances of what happened hours ago in the United States, but in any case, I think it's fair to conclude that it is most probably an indirect result of their own policies. And these governments in the West, they don't learn. Because their interests are not in keeping their people safe. Their interest is in preserving the empire. Otherwise, they would not have been supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria. The Jolani gang, they are Al-Qaeda. They were ISIS. He was the deputy head of ISIS, and he was the head of Al-Qaeda in Syria. And bringing him to power, and Western media collectively trying to create a positive image for him, they are doing an enormous disservice, not just to the people of our region, but to their own people in Europe and the United States.
The metamorphosis of the new Syrian leader, he's already said he'll be in power for 4 years before a single vote is cast, if one ever is. And if it is, how freely it will be cast must be in very serious doubt. But he has put on a suit. He has learned mysteriously to tie the knot on the tie in precisely the way of the English kings. Hence it's called the Windsor knot. I wonder who taught him how to tie it. He is making noises, taking pictures with the Catholic hierarchy and so on, that he does want national unity. That may or may not be true. I personally think it's not, but it may or may not be true. But it's a distinction without a difference, because the people who brought Golani to power are this alphabet soup of fanatic Takfiri groups, and he can't control them either.
No, he definitely cannot control them. And these groups, for the most part, have even failed to accept his offer to join the Ministry of Defense. And many of these groups are not even Syrian. And many of the people and some of the groups that are Syrian are not Syrian. So he is going to have a very tough time. If he takes a hardline approach, then Syria will revolt against him. And if he doesn't, his people or his allies or his rivals are going to take a tough approach towards the people. And we are already seeing that. While he is taking photos with different people from different parts of Syrian civil society, and while he's meeting foreign delegates, his gangs and rival gangs are carrying out massacres and killings across the country. They can't hide this. People are living in fear. Bodies are being found. The Western media, again, can pretend things are all fine. And sadly, some of the supporters of the Palestinian cause in Gaza who've become big fans of Al-Qaeda all of a sudden, they can pretend that everything is fine, but this is not going to work for very long. This reminds me about the time in October, the first month when the Israelis began their onslaught on Gaza. Every time they would massacre Palestinians, Western media would repeat Israeli claims that Hamas is attacking its own people, that Hamas bombed a group of people who were escaping to the south, that a missile misfired, a rocket, a small rocket misfired and slaughtered hundreds of people in a hospital. For a few weeks, they were able to get away with these lies, basically because of the beheaded children lies and the rape lies. But after a while, when it continued, then the apologists of the Israeli regime could no longer control public opinion. And those people who are now becoming apologists of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the other terror groups in Syria, for a period of time, they can fool public opinion and perhaps fool themselves. But this policy, this behavior, the character of these thuggish groups that have been slaughtering people for so many years, that's not going to change. And this is going to continue. And these people are going to, Western media will continue to discredit itself as they have over Gaza and elsewhere. But these people who've been supporting the Palestinian cause, they're going to discredit themselves because these images from Syria are not going to go away.
Now let's turn, can we, to Lebanon. The 60 days which was inexplicably agreed to as a period in which there was a ceasefire, but Israel could come and go as it pleased, and it did come and go as it pleased. My own former father-in-law, so the grandfather of two of my sons, his grave was smashed and disturbed during the period of ceasefire by Israeli invaders. And his father, so my children's great-grandfather, his grave was unspeakably destroyed during the ceasefire, when Israel was still coming into Lebanon and doing anything that they wanted. That ceasefire is about to come to an end. That 60-day interregnum, rather, is about to come to an end. What do you think is going to happen there?
I think there's a very good chance that the conflict will begin again. I think there's a very high probability that there will be war, because Hezbollah has warned the Israeli regime and everyone that the occupation of any part of Lebanon will not be tolerated. But this also shows that Hezbollah was right all along. Those people in Lebanon who are influenced by Western embassies, who are funded by Western NGOs, or those fascist militias in Lebanon that were involved in the Sabra and Shatila massacre in 1982, killing 3,500 Palestinians and Lebanese. These people have been saying that Hezbollah should be disarmed and the Lebanese army should deal with the Israeli regime. But we see that the Lebanese army does not have the capability to deal with the regime, because the Americans and the Europeans will never allow the Lebanese army to be able to have the power and the strength to defend the country. Lebanon has no air defense capabilities. It has no air force. Why? Because the Americans won't let them have it. The Americans and the Europeans only want the Lebanese army to have the resources to be able to crush Hezbollah, or to crush the resistance, or Palestinians, or whoever is a part of Lebanon itself. But the United States, the Europeans will never allow the Lebanese government, at least in its current form, to be able to defend the country. So what we're seeing right now in southern Lebanon is the ceasefire is being violated, and the Lebanese army is not doing anything about it, or at least it's not doing what it's supposed to do. And the United States and those others who are supposed to be preserving the ceasefire, as usual, they're siding with the Israeli regime. And we all know that the Israelis can do whatever they want, and the United States and the West will condone it, support it, fund it, and even facilitate what it does.
Now, the incoming President Donald Trump famously and oftentimes repeated his command that the war in Gaza better be over before January the 20th. It's coming to the end of January the 1st, so soon it will be 19 days. There are no signs, are there, of the war in Gaza coming to an end. The Palestinian resistance continues to fight. Even with knives, they continue to fight. And the Israeli massacres, daily massacres, mainly of women and children, show no signs of letting up. How do you see that happening in the next 19 days?
Well, one thing that I think we have to always keep in mind is that Trump tries to create fear. That is his technique. And after the murder of General Soleimani, which it's his anniversary right now, he said that if Iran strikes back, that he will punish Iran and strike Iran. And Iran did strike back at the Americans, and they fired, I think, 12 missiles at the Al-Assad air base, and the Americans failed to intercept any of the missiles, and enormous damage was caused. Now, some may say the Iranian response was adequate, some may say it was not adequate. But the point was that afterwards, Trump refrained from striking back. Also, when the Iranians downed a very $200 million American drone that was flying over Iranian airspace, Trump didn't do anything. So I think while Trump should be taken seriously, the United States should always be taken seriously. It is a dangerous regime that has carried out war after war. But I think they do recognize that Iran is a very powerful force. And they do recognize that Hamas has enormous influence across the region. They recognize the power of Hezbollah, Yemen. And if Biden could have destroyed Hamas, if Biden could have destroyed Ansarullah in Yemen, if he could have destroyed Hezbollah or Iran or the resistance in Iraq, he would have done so. It's not as if Trump has any special powers that Biden did not have. Biden said he is a Zionist. Biden's national security advisor was a Zionist. He was a Jewish Zionist, and so was his Secretary of State. You can't get more Zionist than that. So I think that Trump, having all the problems that he has at home, economic, social problems, and even now the ongoing war within the MAGA camp, and the problems that he has in Europe with the escalation in Ukraine and with China and elsewhere, I think that his hands are pretty full, and he probably is not that ignorant not to recognize that if he pushes too hard, that it could blow up in his own face.
Professor Marandi, as always, Happy New Year to you, and thank you for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Great pleasure always to interview you. Who is the MOATS person of the year? Donald Trump, Hassan Nasrallah, or Vladimir Putin? Get voting on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Now, phone numbers, let me give you them again because it is New Year's night and I don't know how busy the switchboard currently is. I might be criticized for this, but the toll-free number for the US and Canada is +1 844 944 3344. The free of charge number for the UK and Ireland is 08081 965522, and the worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Take a quick break, and then Silver in Illinois wants to talk about Syria. It is the Global University of the Airwaves, after all. Stay tuned.
George, I'm just looking at another dimension in this Gaza war conflict. Could this be a religious conflict in the guise of it's not Islam versus Christianity versus Judaism, but an ideology, a Zionist ideology, in establishing their leader that is supposed to come in the future, and they will then govern and rule.
It's in their ideology, for sure. The Zionists are no more and no less than a nationalist ideology. They have nothing whatsoever to do with religion. Anybody who thinks Netanyahu is religious hasn't looked too closely into his private life. These people are extreme nationalists, exceptionalists. Some Americans believe in American exceptionalism. Zionists believe in Jewish exceptionalism. Nobody, in truth, is exceptional. There's nothing religious about it. It's about land. It's about nationalist supremacy, ethno-religious supremacy on the land of Palestine. And the Europeans colonized Palestine in the same way that the Europeans colonized South Africa. So fitting. The victims of white European colonialism are coming to the aid of other victims of white European colonialism. And they're doing the whole world a signal service.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Wow, I'm just looking at the footage of the Tesla Cybertruck exploding in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. How spectacular and how symbolic. The Tesla Cybertruck smashing through the front door glass windows of Trump Tower in Las Vegas. It's all kicking off in the United States. And in our poll, President Putin is comfortably ahead everywhere, except on X, where he is ahead, but not by the same margin. As promised, let's go to Silva in Illinois, USA, on Syria. It's global. Go ahead, Silva.
Thank you, George, for taking my call. And that was a great interview with Marandi. Marandi is always great, and especially great on your show. What I wanted to talk about Syria was that bomb that was earlier in December, that now circulating on social media, there's concern that it's a nuclear bomb. I did some research on that myself because I run a small activist group, Lincoln Avenue Progressives, and people were posting it. And I like to verify information like that. So people were posting it was a nuclear bomb. So I'm like, wow, if it's a nuclear bomb, that's really big. We really need to know about this. And I don't think it is, because I found a segment that came out the day after this, the bomb in Syria was nuclear, show a segment on what's called Dialogue Works. I can't say the last name of the person, but the first name of the person who runs the show is Nima, and he had an American expert, Ted Postel, and he had an hour-long explanation that it couldn't have been a nuclear bomb because there wasn't enough damage that we know of, and despite it being mushroom-shaped, and despite it causing an earthquake and all these horrible things, it didn't quite fit the profile, and there wasn't nearly enough damage. But the thing is, we don't know what the damage was, right? And so this really concerns me. I know that you've been talking about this for a while. It didn't really click in with me at first. You're like, there was a quake bomb in Syria, and it's like, and then finally when this was showing up on the feed of my group, I was like, wow, yes, this is a major big deal, and nobody's talking about it. We need to know what that bomb was. Yeah. We need to have, you go in.
Well, we do, Silver. We need to know. I don't know, but here's what I know. It was a 5 on the Richter scale, so it was the equivalent of a medium-sized earthquake. It created a mushroom cloud. the pictures and footage of which are very clear. It was on a somewhat obscure target in or near Tartus, where the Russian base is, naval base, but it can't have been against the Russian naval base, because you can be sure we would have heard about that if it had been. There's some suggestion it was a mountain which was bombed. There's some suggestion that Israel did it just because they could, just so they could show the kind of firepower they had in their arsenal. It may have been, if you recall back from the Afghan days, it may have been what Donald Trump called a Moab, the mother of all bombs. In other words, the biggest non-nuclear bomb you could possibly drop. It could have been a bunker buster of the kind that assassinated Seyed Hassan Nasrallah. It could have been many things, but there are some mysteries attached to it. There have been reports of increased radiation in Cyprus, but very few and far between. And no, as far as I know, I certainly have not seen a picture, still less a video, of the aftermath of the bomb. Why not? If Israel did it to show off, you would have thought that they would have photographed the aftermath and shown it to us to frighten us. But they haven't. The new regime in Syria obviously has no interest in doing so, but no citizen journalist appears to have gotten close enough to take pictures, to show video of it. So it is a big mystery, and you are right all the way in Illinois to be concerned about that, because every time the nuclear threshold lowers, the more danger of all-out nuclear conflagration in the world there clearly is. Now, you can scan the QR code now and leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Piano Man has just done that. Israel, USA, and UK always walk away with clean hands. No accountability, with impunity. And they always know from leadership, Congress, Parliament, that they will never be held accountable. And Abu Swaleh Musafir says Hassan Nasrallah fought a fight he knew was, during his lifetime, unwinnable in concrete terms, but in spirit, forever winnable. And Scott M says NATO backed ISIS and Al-Qaeda at that. And Two-Way Stretch says MOATS Person of the Year for me is Ghadi Francis, big friend of this show. And Guni 1972 says, Lavrov didn't even make the shortlist. Reason, I didn't vote. Well, there's nobody here more in admiration of Sergei Lavrov than me. But I think if you put him in there instead of President Putin, you might have caused him some internal difficulties. Dennis is in New York, wants to talk about the rally in Istanbul. Go ahead, Dennis.
Hello again, George. Thank you for having me back, and I'll just be brief. Follow on the conversation we had on Wednesday about the Hagia Sophia and its singular significance in the events that are happening today in West Asia and in the world at large. And yes, you can find the poster that Erdogan's son had designed and produced for the rally in Istanbul today, which represents just what we were talking about last week. And that is, on the poster it says, yesterday, Hagia Sophia, today, Umayyad, tomorrow, Jerusalem. This is going to be a huge rally in Istanbul if it hasn't already taken place. It absolutely speaks to the designs that Erdogan has on establishing himself as the leader of the reconstituted Ottoman Empire. And this has major implications for what's going on, and a lot of things I think that are going on today in Syria and Israel and around can be explained when viewed in this light. So I'm going to encourage you to try and find that poster and show it to your viewers, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, and this is a graphic representation of just
what we will
that.
do, Dennis, you know my view on Erdogan. He has absolutely no intention of going to Jerusalem, except on an Israeli package tour, perhaps. But it's a useful carrot on a stick for his Muslim base in Turkey, the vast majority of whom are sincere and devoted people. I know many of them. I've marched with many of them, driven on siege-breaking convoys to Gaza with them. They are genuinely devoted, dedicated, and entirely determined people. They want to liberate Jerusalem, but Erdogan will never lead them there. Thanks for the call. Now, on the podcast, some great news here. Tonight we are in the top 20 in Ireland and Israel, as well as in the top 10 in Hong Kong, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. And since we started the MOATS podcast, we've had 1.1 million downloads, and 546,000 of those were in 2024. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen. Now let's go to Jordan, where Mohammed wants to talk about Palestine. Mohammed, welcome.
Thank you, George, and congratulations on the great numbers for the podcast.
Thank you.
I'd like to say that I've been following you for a long period of time, and I've always thought that you were on the right side of history for the majority of your stances. And while I do share your depression, your dejection, and your anger over what has happened for the overall Palestinian cause this year, especially since the latest events in Syria, may I say that I do not share your, let's say, grim outlook on the future of resisting the Zionist movement, because the Palestinians have indeed, and the Arabs as well, have managed to, let's say, survive much worse than what is happening right now. They managed to survive the fall of Beirut, which in '82, which you know very well, which seemed like the end of that lifeline. They managed to survive the ramifications of the fall of the Soviet Union. They managed to survive the death of Arafat and the failure of the two intifadas. And so even with what is happening right now, which does seem like a very harsh defeat, I do have some hope. That's basically...
Yeah, I think I opened the show tonight by saying we are in this fray. We are optimistic and determined. And I have never at any time suggested that the Palestinians themselves were defeated or were a hopeless case or a hopeless cause. I was talking about the wider Arab world. And the reality is that so far I've been proven right about the wider Arab world. You're calling me from a country that has not just normal relations with Israel, but super close relations with Israel, even though the vast majority of the population of the country you're calling me from wish that it were otherwise. But the situation continues to exist. I'm choosing my words carefully so as not to place you in any difficulty. 100 million Arabs and more are in Egypt. And although the vast majority of those would love to tear down the walls of Rafah and liberate the Palestinians in Gaza, the regime in Cairo continues to exist. The belly-dancing kings and emirs continue to belly dance. And even though the vast majority of their population wish it were otherwise, nothing changes. So I'll be delighted to be proven wrong, Mohammed. Nobody will be more delighted than me to be proven wrong. But for now, Palestine is the question for us. And anything that impacts positively or negatively on the Palestinian cause will be revealed, will be analyzed, will be argued over here on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Thanks for the call. More comments on YouTube. Antonio Cristoforo says, Lavrov is my favorite person of the decade. Kyle Lee Harper says, Brian Berletic said it was a weapons depot, hence the mushroom clouds. I'd like to say that might well be true, and Brian's a very clever man, but I still haven't seen any pictures of it. And if Israel had bombed a weapons depot with enough weapons in it to create a mushroom cloud, it is odd that they haven't released the footage. And Monkey Boy says Russia has Lavrov, Britain has Donut, Dada, Double D, Lamy. Indeed. Lavrov, David Lamy. Takes your pick. Pamela Strandquest says, the bombs raining down on Gaza are the most ferocious I've ever seen. It does seem clear that this is a dumping and testing ground for worse weapons. And Torwind says, there's no way the Russians would not have detected the radiation if that was the case. Whether they would have announced it or not is a different question. Precisely, Torwind. On the line from India is Nahid. Nahid, welcome to the show.
Hi, George. I just wanted to thank you for organizing such a wonderful program on world affairs. It was insightful and well arranged. And I truly appreciate all the efforts you put in. Wishing you a very happy new year. May the year ahead bring you success and happiness. Sir, I also have a suggestion for the future program topic, the issue of right-wing attacks on the minority communities in India. It is really a critical subject that deserves attention, and I believe it could lead to a meaningful discussion.
Well, I view with grave concern the continued horror stories of Muslims mainly, but over Christmas, I saw horrific crimes against an elderly Christian lady tied to a tree, her face disfigured by Hindutva mobs in India. It is very troubling indeed. I view it with grave concern, Nahid, and we'll try to incorporate more analysis of it into the show. And thank you very much for your very kind words. We don't get many calls from India. I'm glad that we've got one tonight and hope to encourage more of them. Who is the MOATS person of the year? On Telegram, 8% say Donald Trump, 25% on X say Donald Trump. On the YouTube community poll, 19% say Donald Trump, and 13% say Donald Trump on the YouTube stream. The X number of 25 is a very respectable figure, as is the 19% on the YouTube community poll. And depending on what you mean by person of the year, Donald Trump's greatest comeback since Muhammad Ali's rumble in the jungle in Zaire, as was, it's a very significant historical event, and Donald Trump is a very significant historical figure. So in 2024, you could make a good case for saying he was the person of the year. Hassan Nasrallah, though, got 27% on Telegram, 32% on X, 28% on the YouTube community poll, and 27% on the YouTube stream. Very significant numbers indeed, but not as significant as Vladimir Putin. After all this period of war and demonization in the Western countries, on Telegram, 65% of you voted Vladimir Putin the person of the year. On X, 43%. On the YouTube community poll, 53%. And on the YouTube stream, 60%. That's those who are watching right now on the YouTube stream. Well, he'll be very delighted at these numbers, but there's still time for them to change. You've got about 40 minutes still to vote. Coming up after this short break, we have the man who in a sane United States of America would be about to move into Foggy Bottom as the Secretary of State. Yes, Chris Hedges, political commentator, journalist, writer, and host of the Chris Hedges Report. Coming up right after this. Stay tuned.
Many people today struggle with the common mainstream media consumer. These types of people are mindless zombies. Instead of living authentically, they feed off masking their true thoughts and feelings, doing nothing and criticizing those who actually do their research. These type of media consumer can be highly manipulative, so here are some golden standard clapbacks when they start with their propaganda. When they say you are too much for them, show them a mirror and tell them to look for less. Draw a diagram of where your business is and their business is, to visually show them they are in the wrong area. When they say, please watch this clip from this reputable BBC journalist, remind them that there are no longer any reputable BBC journalists, and to instead watch the mother of all talk shows for some real journalism. The next time you encounter a brainwashed zombie, hold your head high and know their obsession to eat your brain is masking their jealousy of your confidence, your freedom in self-expression, and most importantly, your authenticity. Keep listening to learn more on the mother of all talk shows.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, let's waste no time. The Oracle has arrived in the studio. It's Chris Hedges, and I'm very glad to wish you, Chris, a Happy New Year. Glad you spent it with us here on the mother of all talk shows. My condolences to the people of New Orleans who have suffered in the early hours of the morning a terrorist atrocity, which on the face of it appears to be yet another murderous attack emanating from the alphabet soup of extremism of the ISIS, Al-Qaeda variety. Unless you can tell me any differently, by updating me, that's how it currently looks. Your views on it, please.
I don't know why anyone's surprised after a year of genocidal assault in which not only are Western countries like the United States complicit, but have embraced the role of essentially arming and sustaining the genocide. It's, what the CIA calls blowback. So I think every day that the genocide continues in Gaza, it's just another advertisement for the hypocrisy, of the racism, the callousness of Western nations such as the United States. So supposedly there was an ISIS flag found in the truck. It was, it would only happened a few hours ago, but it seems to point to an extremist attack by a jihadist, or at least somebody who identified with jihadist groups. But I don't know why anyone's surprised. I mean, this isn't this is what happens. They don't, people who stand up to Western countries like the United States, or if you want to look at a sophisticated military like Israel, they don't have an air force. They will use the cruder forms of, trucks, box cutters, whatever, suicide vests. But yeah, I think this is a harbinger of what's coming.
Yeah, but I get the point that you're making. The United States is in full-scale complicity and direct involvement, in fact, in Sana'a in Yemen yesterday. British and American aircraft were killing Yemenis all over again. I get that point. But what about the apparent contradiction that your government and mine are fully behind the ISIS al-Qaeda front now running Syria, yet an ISIS al-Qaeda type fanatic is murdering Americans in New Orleans? How do we square that?
Well, I think that's part of the ineptitude of, in particular, U.S. foreign policy. So Jimmy Carter just died. It was Jimmy Carter and Brzezinski, his national security advisor, who dreamt up the foolish idea of destroying the government in Kabul, provoking a Soviet invasion in 1979, and then spending $3 billion of U.S. money and several $1 billion of Saudi money to create the Taliban, which created al-Qaeda. And again, you look at the Syrian conflict, we were arming these groups. I think it's $500 million in arms. They call them the quote-unquote moderate rebels. So those contradictions are not new. And in fact, there was a moment in the Syrian conflict when we realized that arms had been passed into jihadist groups that were completely hostile to us and to the project in Iraq, and they began to bomb them. There was the U.S. warplanes were bombing them. So functioning as kind of Assad's de facto air force, it just is part of the whole folly of empire. And yes, you make an extremely good point. These are the people who now control Syria.
Let me give you some breaking news, Chris. Reuters are reporting that the former Israeli Defense Minister, Gallant, is resigning from Parliament. He was fired from the government in November after months of disagreement over the conduct of the war, but he kept his seat as an elected member of the Knesset. Now, tonight, he has resigned from Parliament, presumably leaving politics. There was an emergency operation on Netanyahu himself this week. What's going on inside Israel in your view?
It's Netanyahu's consolidation of power. Remember, Gallant was favored by the United States in particular to replace Netanyahu. And Netanyahu, especially with the incursion into Lebanon, the strikes that have been carried out in Syria to degrade what's left of the Syrian military, the occupation of the buffer zone, so-called buffer zone on the Golan Heights, which is Syrian territory, including Mount Hermon. Now we see pictures on social media of Israelis skiing on Mount Hermon. This has made Netanyahu wildly popular. Netanyahu's hold on power immediately after October 7th was very precarious. He needed figures like Gallant. He doesn't need them anymore. So I think it's an indication of Netanyahu's strength within Israel.
Now, going back to the U.S., Donald Trump will be along in a minute. He's going to have a number of problems to deal with on the international level. If we could seriatim go through them, starting rather with the Middle East, in the wake of what would appear to be an ISIS Al-Qaeda terror outrage in the US, and maybe two. We don't know who blew up the Tesla cyber truck outside Trump's hotel in Las Vegas. The instinct of Donald Trump would be to take a hammer to the hornet's nest that is the Idlib nest of these terrorist organizations. And if he does, those that he doesn't kill will spill around the world, posing a danger to all of us. What do you think he's likely to do first in relation to Syria?
I mean, that is the big unknown. What will he do in Syria? He tends to be driven by events. So what happened in New Orleans, tends to provoke a reaction. It's often not particularly well thought out. I think we don't know. We don't know how he's going to handle Syria. Is he going to make the connections that, are obvious, the ones that you have made, tying ISIS and these groups to the current Syrian government and Golani? I don't know. I mean, that is, yeah. And Trump is impulsive. And so he's very hard to predict.
Yeah. How are things in the MAGA camp? There was a Donnybrook going on the last time I looked between Steve Bannon, who represents the blue flame of MAGA, Put America First, and so on, and more globalist, more cosmopolitan elements like Elon Musk. Has that been solved? Has Trump stepped in? Or are we seeing a major fissure inside MAGA before Trump even gets back in the door?
I think it is a major fissure. I mean, Trump stepped in on the immigrant visas because, of course, high-tech companies want them. Tesla wants them. Musk brings in skilled workers from overseas on foreign visas. The MAGA base is hostile to the importation of immigrants to take jobs, especially high-tech jobs. But I don't think contradictions within MAGA is particularly new. I think the entire movement has been riven with contradictions, the most egregious being this kind of faux populism that Trump peddles, and then his subservience to the billionaire class and Wall Street. I used to say you can't vote against the interests of Goldman Sachs. It doesn't matter who you vote for. And Trump had Goldman Sachs employees in high positions in his administration, just as Obama and Biden and everyone else does. And Trump comes out of that world. He comes out of that world of high finance. But yes, I think you're right that there are contradictions. How stark will those fissures become, and what will that mean? I don't know. But I think those fissures have always been there.
Staying in the U.S. for a minute, I don't know if you watched it. I commend it to you and the viewers. The new, it's on Disney, the new documentary Beatles 64, which talks about the invasion of the United States by the 4 Liverpool young men in 1964. It's a phenomenal documentary, but it opens with a kind of extended eulogy to President Kennedy. The Beatles arrived just not long after the murder of Kennedy in Dallas. In my view, a coup d'etat. And I got to wondering as I watched and dried a tear how far we've come and how far down we have sunk. From Jack Kennedy to Joe Biden and Donald Trump is a very long way. Are there any possibilities of the Democratic Party in the United States? Are they showing any signs of introspection, of intellectual search for renaissance? Or are they just a busted flush, in your opinion?
No, that's what's been so disturbing. Their whole post-mortem has been looking at or blaming anybody but themselves. So it's because Biden didn't drop out early enough. It's because Harris, didn't message properly. It's all about messaging and all about gimmicks. It's not about the fundamental issue, which is that the Democratic Party, particularly starting with the Clinton administration, although Jimmy Carter was part of this, sold out the working class, sold out working men and women. And that's just a reality that they won't acknowledge, nor, of course, their own complicity in doing it. So I don't see in all of the postmortems any grappling with why the Democratic Party, because it's not, and Bernie Sanders did make this point, that it's not just the white working class that's now walked out on the Democrats, it's the Latino working class and large sections of the black working class because of their betrayal by the Democrats. So I think that what we've seen following the election, remember, they're trying to resurrect Kamala Harris now to run for governor. They're talking about her that they need to have her run in the next presidential race. This is, and the whole convention itself, the Democratic National Convention, which nominated a woman who never won a primary vote. There was no dissent. The campaign itself was celebrity driven, Beyonce, Oprah, all this kind of stuff. Absolutely vapid, absolutely hollow. No, I think it's the death of the Democratic Party. I don't know what comes in its place, if anything. Trump has reconfigured the Republican Party, the establishment wing of the Republican Party, including Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney, her father, who left as a war criminal and left office with a 13% approval rating. The Democrats, or in particular Harris, were running around lauding the fact that they endorsed them. So the establishment wing of the Republican Party has migrated to the Democratic Party, fused with the Democratic Party, figures like Mitt Romney, and Trump has created a very cultish political organization. But I don't see any signs within the Democratic Party that it has the capacity for self-analysis, self-criticism, and real reform. And that's, of course, very dangerous.
And finally, it's very strange. I myself, in my monologue, attacked Jimmy Carter almost in exactly the same words that you have just criticized him. There is a tradition not to speak ill of the recently dead, but one cannot look at the whole post-Afghan intervention by Carter and Brzezinski, the theorist of it, Carter, the political driver of it. If you think about it, that's 45 years ago. Those acts have, to a significant extent, shaped the events of the last 45 years. He wasn't any saint, Jimmy Carter, but he did do one thing that might help him at the pearly gates. He identified the apartheid nature of the Israeli state, something which has not been mentioned, I should tell you, in any of the Western panegyrics to which we've been treated on this side of the Atlantic. It's as if he never wrote that book after all.
Yes, of course he did that out of office, but in office, he orchestrated the Camp David Accords in 1979 between Sadat, president of Egypt, and Menachem Begin, where he sold out the Palestinians. He refused to allow the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, to even partake in the talks. All of the promises that Begin made to Carter to attempt to resolve the Palestinian question along with Jordan and Egypt, to permit Palestinian self-governance in the West Bank and Gaza within 5 years, to end Israeli settlements. None of it, as usual, none of it came to pass. Carter, in fact, accused Begin of lying, But the fact is there was no mechanism for enforcement at all for all of these promises, many of which were not even written down on paper. And Carter, like all U.S. presidents, was unwilling to defy the Israel lobby to impose sanctions. And the Palestinians, once again found themselves powerless and abandoned. And that was Carter. So we have to separate ex-President Carter from President Carter. I mean, I was covering the war in El Salvador at the time, and Archbishop Oscar Romero, later assassinated, begged Carter to cease weapon shipments to El Salvador, and Carter refused. I mean, he backed Mobutu in the Congo. He gave significant military aid to the Indonesian government when it was carrying out the genocide in East Timor. He actually walked away from the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks Treaty, SALT II, with the Soviet Union, which sought to curb nuclear weapons deployment. He had a pretty nasty, he supported UNITA, the murderous counter-revolutionary group led by Jonas Savimbi, along with the Khmer Rouge. So, and Ferdinand Marcos. And of course, you mentioned the Mujahideen, which he in essence created along with the Saudis, the Taliban in the war in Afghanistan, which left 1.5 million Afghans dead. So is a pretty dark record as president.
Chris Hedges, a dark record. They all seem to have them. Thanks very much for joining us. Nonetheless, I wish you the very best in the new year. That was Chris Hedges, political commentator, journalist, writer, and host of the Chris Hedges Report. Quick break, then it's your calls all the way up to Gayatri with the social media news roundup. Stay tuned. On the line is a Rose in Texas. How's that at the beginning of a song? On Californication, which is a song. Rose, welcome to the show.
Fan of the show, transgender fan of the show, and I wanted to briefly address your monologue from last week on Californication, because I almost entirely agree with what you said. Trans women athletes taking medals and records, directing children at nightclubs, and even going to elementary schools themselves, not to mention hormone blockers for children as well. The attack on freedom of speech, not only against conservatives, but anyone who doesn't fall in line with the agenda, rainbow flags on NATO military aircraft, which is certainly doing more to cultivate anti-queer sentiment around the world than there already is. All of that makes me sick. So because I don't believe in incest, bestiality, necrophilia, and pedophilia, I'm basically culturally right-wing by today's standards, even though less than 5 years ago, I'd still be left-wing. So in regards to you and everyone else watching who thinks of me and people like me as the villains right now, you should know that I support the most traditional Muslim, Jewish, Abrahamic believers to be as homophobic and transphobic as they want, because guess what? That's freedom of religion, which is a value we claim to have in the West. Now, my religion, I suppose, is I believe I'm a woman, but guess what? Not everyone has to convert to my religion. Otherwise, we basically have a theocracy, only this theocracy is for the ever-evolving LGBTQIA supercalifragilisticexpialidocious club. So that's all I wanted to get out of my system. Thank you.
Well, Rose, if I could put your call in a glass bottle and ship it around the world, I promise you that I would do so. Crystal clear, beautifully expressed, and I wish you every happiness in life. It is exactly what people who are transgender should be saying. And if they were, they would disappoint the liberal zealots who want to use them as a battering ram against the traditional family values of the rest of us. Beautifully expressed, Rose. I'll never forget it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Toll free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Now, the last time May in Oklahoma called the show, just before Christmas, her phone call went viral with 2.4 million views on YouTube alone and millions of others on the other platforms. And so it's with particular delight I welcome back May in Oklahoma. May, I don't know if you were aware of the internet sensation you became the last time you called the show.
Hi, George. I wasn't really aware. Mostly I thought it was from your answer, but I'm very excited to know that because I wanted to call you today and say Happy New Year and much love to you, Gayatri, your team, all your listeners. And I so very much appreciate hearing from Dr. Marandi. The Iranian people are so misunderstood. I know in the United States, the ones that I have met are lovely and beautiful and very civilized. Of course, no group is 100% great, but I did want to put in that little word. I just wanted to call today. I appreciate your immediate approach at the beginning of the show about positivity. And I know there are so many things that are happening all over the world that are discouraging and frustrating and upsetting. And I myself struggle sometimes to be positive, but I have learned through my life, the challenges in my life, that being positive always gets me further than allowing myself to fall into negativity. And it's very easy to feel hate and anger towards people that we disagree with and people who do horrible things. But hate only hurts us. It does not stop another person. It does not harm another person. It's just like drinking Drano. We don't want to clean our pipes with Drano because then we'll be dead. And I appreciate, George, that you bring as positive an approach as you can. And I think that's one reason you're becoming more and more popular throughout the world, because you are letting us know what's going on. And I think it's important for us to all try to remember that even if we want to hate someone, we must not break down and participate in initiating violence against them. I believe in self-defense. I absolutely do. But I do not believe in initiating force or fraud, and I believe you're in that with me, and most of your listeners do. Do we want to punish?
Amen. What a beautiful set. Yeah, a beautiful set of attitudes there, May. Some people, including on the lines tonight, imagine that I'm a subjective person. I really am not. I have followed all of my life since my teenage years, since I first heard these words, the words of Ho Chi Minh, the Vietnamese leader, who said, "Calamity has hardened me and turned my mind to steel, and that without the cold of winter, there cannot be the warmth of spring." These two couplets are what guide me. So I am capable of seeing the worst disaster unfolding and remaining cool, calm, and collected about it. Equally, I am capable of seeing the greatest victory while I'm the calmest person in the room watching it. As others celebrate, I do not. So nothing is ever as good or ever as bad as it first appears. These are my watchwords. Last word to you, May, from Oklahoma. We must try and get down there, Gayatri and me, when we make our tour of the United States this year. Last word to you, May.
Thank you, George. I would love to meet you. And one last thing. About 6 months ago, I realized that the street parallel to mine, 1 block away, is called Roachdale. I thought you'd enjoy that little bit of information. So anyway, we love you, and much good luck for a happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year. May in Oklahoma, the most viral telephone caller that we have ever had. Let's go to Vancouver, another place I hold in great regard. I've spoken there many times. Dean in Vancouver wants to talk about transnational elites. Well, there's plenty of those in Vancouver. Dean, what would you like to say?
Yes, you're right, George. I want to say thank you for all your informational treasure, and best to you and your family. Beautiful in Vancouver. We got a dusting of snow in the mountains yesterday, and I see it every day when I take my swim in the bay. Beautiful. I want to tie all your subjects together.
You're a better man than me, Gunga Din. Go ahead.
Well, we have a bit of a delay here. Now, as I was saying, I'm going to tie in together your poll and your esteemed interviewees today and talk about how the poll is showing that Vladimir Putin is the most significant figure, let's say, in 2024. I agree with that. It's the reasons why I agree with that are relevant, because as I was saying to your moderator, that I believe that when we talk about nation against nation and nationalism growing, for example, in the supposed country of Israel, that's just a front. And it's always behind that front is an oligarchy. And clearly, we do not have democracy in the West. We have an oligarchy which can buy citizenship in any country. And they frequently have citizenship in multi-countries. They are driving, the politically active ones are driving the currents that we're experiencing. And so to bring it back to Putin, you see the countries that are more successful are where the leaders get an actual meritocracy working, which they use to counterbalance the oligarchs. So this is a tricky job to do, and Putin currently is doing the best. While we see in the West that the oligarchs have just taken over, and we have this fantasy land in our media, and foremost. So that's the main point. The last time we spoke, you said that you couldn't believe that people would use nuclear brinkmanship because of their children and this and that and the other thing. And the other key point I wanted to get across to you, George, is that people like you and me from the bottom 99% of the socioeconomic hierarchy can't even imagine the way these people think. Their view of the planet and the universe is very different from our own. And what's important to them is not the same as the things that are important to us. Thus, we see the policy of the West going in direct divergence from the best interest of the 99%. So when I understand that you couldn't understand why anybody would go to nuclear brinkmanship, however, we can't understand. These people are as aliens to us in the way they think. So that's the main point. I appreciate your show so much,
George. Two very
George.
powerful
Thank you so
points, Dean. And the vision of you swimming in the bay in January is bracing, to be sure. Big hello to all my friends in Vancouver, of whom there are many. You made powerful points. But 25 years ago, today, Russia was liberated from the drunken disgrace of the presidency of Boris Yeltsin. Russia was lying drunk on the floor while Western corporate interests and oligarchs alike were picking its pockets. The wealth of the Russian people was being stolen and privatized at fire sale prices. And Russia had become a laughing stock. 25 years ago today, Vladimir Putin came to power. And he has picked Russia up, put it back on its feet, brushed off the dirt of the Yeltsin era, started to take back the wealth and power that the oligarchy had accrued, returned Russia to its highest level of prestige since 1945 and the great victory of the Red Army at the end of the Second World War. And you can see in this poll this evening that nearly 22,000 people have voted in how comfortably people consider Putin as the MOATS person of the year. Now, I didn't guide them to that outcome. I might actually have voted otherwise, but that's the outcome of this poll, and that's significant. And many people have said Lavrov should have been in the poll. And that's true, that Lavrov is by a country mile the most accomplished diplomat and foreign policy specialist anywhere in the world. Compare him with David Lammy, for God's sake, with Friedland in Canada, with Blinken in the United States, with Wong in Australia. Compare Lavrov to these people. It truly is chalk and cheese. It truly is a giant amongst dwarfs. And so the team of Putin and Lavrov has proved an unbeatable team. And they have achieved great things for their country. And they have opposed the unipolar order that the United States had hoped to extend well into the 21st century and more. So I have no doubt that God did the Russian people a very big turn when he arranged for Yeltsin to shuffle drunkenly off the stage 25 years ago, and for his replacement to be one so manifestly competent. Now, I've often said, I myself would not have been a voter for Vladimir Putin. I would myself have voted for the major opposition party in the Duma in the Russian Federation. And I probably still would if I had a vote in the Russian elections, which I don't. I don't think enough power and enough wealth has been taken back from the oligarchy and returned to the state. I don't believe that Russia's diplomatic and geopolitical position has been prosecuted sufficiently. I've said so many times, for example, if I were in charge in the Kremlin, I would have sailed a Russian and a Chinese hospital ship into the bay in Gaza at the height of the massacre and defied Netanyahu to fire upon them if he dared. And there are many other things that I would myself have done differently. So I'm not a Putin fanboy. But nothing that I've just said about Putin could possibly be gainsaid by the most acerbic critic out there of the remarks that I have just made. They could say, what about this and what about that? But they could not deny that the Russian people today are hundreds of % better off than they were 25 years ago, and that Russia's standing in the world is not immeasurably greater than it was when Boris Yeltsin couldn't get off the plane at Dublin Airport to shake the hands of the Irish statespeople who'd gathered there to welcome him because he was too drunk to get up. So who is the MOATS person of the year? Last chance to vote. Donald Trump, Hassan Nasrallah, or Vladimir Putin. Now, comments. Alpaca My Bag, such a great name. The nuke story is a distraction from the actual genocide. Don't fall for it. James Kelman, wow, how late it was. MOATS is #1 in Tel Aviv because Mossad is watching us and putting us all on a watch list. And Lorenzo Orsini says, George keeps saying that Frankenstein's monster will come back to bite us. Unfortunately, they only bite the hapless victims. Frankenstein is the elite who will never be made to suffer. Very powerful indeed. Now, a very outstanding figure from the United States that has been a regular caller into the show and about whom I know more now than I did, and Erobos in New York. I'll be replying to your substantive email just as soon as I can. But Erobos has been a voice, a rich, dark, brown voice of sophistication and of hope from the United States on the mother of all talk shows for some time now. And I'm glad to say he joins us again on New Year's Day. Erobos, I do hope that 2025 is a good year for you, and I have some ideas about that I'll write to you about. But tell us, if you would, how you see the atrocity that took place in New Orleans today, the near atrocity that took place in Las Vegas. How are the United States going to respond to this, in your view?
A salubrious late evening. Greetings and salutations, and most kind introduction, Mr. G, to yourself, the wonderful Gayatri Galloway, the MOATS staff, Happy New Year. And to Jaya, who's always so kind to me, and whenever she can and whenever she able, make sure I get on the air. Before I answer your question, I wanted to carve out, as is my wont to do, a special time to acknowledge the mother of all talk shows itself. I won't say that other people take the program and the show for granted, but I know personally that there's nowhere else I know I can call, or I would want to call, that would even take ordinary, or in my case, extraordinary people and put us up on the air for no charge, right? We don't, I encourage everyone to support your Patreon and wherever else they can support you, so YouTube doesn't get to skim off the top and take the fees. The best, living well is the best revenge, as George Herbert said. So I think this program, the quality of it, the quality of the audience, the power of yourself, Gayatri, and all the staff, despite the Hasbara attacks and the attacks raining down from the establishment, I want to say a special and a heartfelt and a sincere thank you for, even during my time when I was in half homelessness and then evicted to full homelessness and ended up in a shelter that was basically a crack house with 100 rooms and 200 inmates. I always thought that despite what I'm going through, the people of Gaza have it much worse. Many of them don't even have a life, much less a hard life, because of the crimes against themselves. The people of the Congo and other hotspots, Sudan, other genocides that's going on. So I want to take the time to mention that, especially. On to your question, it says you already highlighted, and the good professor there, Hedges, the hedge clippers, he stated it's and I highlighted this prior, the analogy that you've spoken of now for years about the monster is the most apropos of all, because what one of the commenters had mentioned, Frankenstein himself was killed by the monster. It came back on him, and if the commenter has said or inferred that the establishment doesn't get harmed, that's not always the case. The part of the reason Rome went down was many of the people of Rome turned against it. not just culturally or economically, and became too bloated and larger, but many of the Romans themselves, tribus and others, from whom the word tribe is allegedly derived in one interpretation, they turned against Rome, the very same people. And they did bring them down and such, and you know the story better than I do. So it's tragic. It's just for, you know, the people here, you know, I always say the people here in the U.S., you know, what I call the United Snakes of America, the moron majority, 50% of the problem is from the establishment. The other 50% is the sleepwalking masses that, you know, vote for the same, you know, because as long as they can live comfortably, as long as they could turn Netflix on or Disney or watch the game, they're not really feeling the impact of the catastrophe, the pain caused by the United Snakes and all their satrap lapdogs and sycophants. And so when things like this happen, and, you know, is anyone truly innocent? Yes, people have ownership, and they have care, custody, and control of themselves for the most part, and they stay out of other people's way. But they empower people to bring this upon them, you know, and you can articulate this better than I. And I'm not saying I don't feel for the people, but at a certain point, they have to come to terms with reality, that you're not splendid isolationism like the British used to have it, that you untouched in all the crimes and blood-soaking you've committed overseas and domestically. So I'm not justifying the actions of this Al-Qaeda supporter, this HTS guy or whoever he is, the 99 flavors of Al-Qaeda, but I can tell you that no one will go unscathed, right? And for whom the bell tolls for everyone that supports the establishment, you know, and this should mobilize people to fight against these people and destroy them. But we shall see. And I appreciate the time, and I'm honored, and more power to MOATS, the Galloway clan, and to all the MOATS family. Thank you.
Well, if ever a call vindicated the build-up to it, that was surely it. Erebos, as he just said, went from a half-homeless man to a wholly homeless man, living in a shelter, effectively a crack house. He doesn't normally have the price of the phone call. And yet, this is Aristotelian wisdom that he imparts in these telephone calls. I'll be in touch, Erebos. Thanks for everything that you said. Now, I said about the Tesla truck that exploded outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. I called it a near atrocity, but in fact, one person has been killed in it, and 7 have been injured after a Tesla Cybertruck exploded outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. Now, call me a conspiracy theorist, but the chance that that was a mere coincidence is practically zero in my mind. Let me know if you think differently. Now, we're joined by Gayatri with the social media roundup. Gayatri, I don't have to wish you a Happy New Year. I've done so many times over the last few hours, but I'm sure that the audience will want to convey to you what many of them have done already in writing, that we need to get a bigger role for you on this show. Not tonight, but soon.
Well, thank you for that. And yes, best wishes to our audience from myself personally. When this poll of the show tonight came up, I think a lot of our audience got confused as to what it actually means, as it's from the show or from the audience. And so that's why people like Jake Soy says the true MOATS person of the year is Scott Ritter. His insight into the Middle East and his sharing of his knowledge and expertise are invaluable to those of us who seek out the truth. And we have many such guests, of course. We've had plenty of them all over the year, and we will have more of them.
We had 2 of them tonight, 2 of top-drawer guests.
Outstanding.
Chris Hedges and Professor Marandi. My goodness, where will you get guests like that? and then be able to phone in the show and get on the air.
Exactly. As you heard during the show through the comments and the calls, Lavrov is an all-time favorite. My goodness, so interesting commentary. And yeah, the greatest comeback since Rumble in the Jumble didn't make it as far as we thought he would.
He didn't get 20% of the vote on average. In fact, he didn't get much over 15. Sorry, Donald. I probably would have voted for you.
Well, Karl Morris says the actual most person of the year is George Galloway Esquire. Such wisdom, integrity, and honesty. Karl Morris.
Okay.
The best
no
member.
relation.
No relations. It's Morris, not Morrison. The best member of parliament still alive. The best PM we never had, despite the odd difference perspective on European trade. So that's him. And on that subject, Julian Mallon says, your victory in Rochdale, George, that was the highlight of 2024. Keep going. And there was indeed a highlight.
That's Julian Mallon's King's Counsel, by the way, KC. He's a King's Counsel. Thank you, Julian.
Thank you, Julian. Yahoo News also shared that news, that was one of the highlights of 2024.
Well, they shared your picture with your Palestine fingernail.
Well, it was...
That made the Yahoo News Associated Press roundup of the year. There it is.
Yes.
You made the picture of the year roundup.
It's about me pointing at you with my Palestinian flag nail polish, of course.
But the picture would be nothing without you.
No, but the point is that I started wearing this Palestinian flag on my nail when the genocide broke out 453 days ago. And I still have to wear it. I still have to wear it.
In fact, our children are agitating. Our girls are
yes.
agitating to have the same nail.
They do, yes, exactly. But the clear winner of the poll is no doubt Vladimir Putin. John C. says Putin wins hands down.
Yeah, it's quite a big, handsome victory, isn't it?
Yeah, against the odds of the USA and the West. Putin has the brains, Biden and Starmer plus Macron have the brains of a rocking horse, and that is insulting to a rocking horse. And I think this is the biggest, this is why he's won clear out, is because of the contrast, as you described earlier. It is today, indeed, 25 years ago, in which the transition took place. And if you compare and contrast his New Year's speech, it's incredible.
Well, we've met him, and I've met him 3 times. And I mean, it's hard to put it into words. He's an incredibly humble guy. There's no, Donald Trump swagger about Vladimir Putin. And he has a background, of course, in intelligence, backroom, a guy, though he played a frontline role in the liberation of southern Africa, in which, I remind you, 55,000 Cuban military volunteers fought to defeat apartheid in South Africa, and many left their bones in the ground in the great battles against the apartheid army in Angola. It was Chris Hedges, he mentioned Carter supporting Savimbi. Well, Vladimir Putin was there as a key liaison with the liberation movements that were eventually victorious in southern Africa. Not that it's been an unblemished future ever since for them, but at least they were freed of apartheid, and Cuba played a magnificent role in that, and Vladimir Putin played a magnificent role in that. But nobody had heard of him 25 years ago. And look what the last quarter century would have been like without him.
Incredible, incredible. It's also Cuba's anniversary today, of course. That's 66 years ago that Fidel Castro took over from the Batistas.
Wow.
New year, new events. Just to continue my point on President Putin, Stan Kerr says, Sir Putin is an excellent president. He is trusted by 2/3 of the world. And this is also something we need to always keep in mind, in perspective, that we are speaking from just an 11% part of the population, whereas the rest of the world, of course...
They like Putin.
They can...
But a lot of people in the West like Putin also.
Yeah, that's right, that's true.
Despite all the efforts that have been made to demonize him and to demonize those with a good word to say about him, like us.
Well, Terry Williams says Putin seems to be the most calm and level-headed leader, especially in Europe. He appears to make decisions that consider whether they benefit Russia's citizens, which is a rarity amongst our leaders. And this is another obvious point to his fans living in the West, because he's obviously putting Russia's interests first, not just in speech, but in practice.
We wish we had leaders that put our people first.
Well, this is what Wilson says. He says the USA tells Ukraine to end the gas transit across Ukraine. What a great friend the USA is to Europe. Happy to impoverish Europeans, happy to lure industry to the USA, and obviously the weak and worthless have to be in power in European countries. Otherwise, real leadership would have ended this abusive, selfish relationship we have with America.
So no more Russian gas in Europe because of a decision taken by Ukraine, ordered by the USA. But hey, there's a solution. The Americans are going to sell us at 5 times the price of Russian gas. American gas. Go figure. Business is business, right?
Embarrassing, right?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
And the European leaders go along with it, or most of them.
Yeah, on their knees.
Yeah.
Now, obviously Chris Hedges touched upon him, Jimmy Carter. He died at the end of our last show on Sunday. And Mega John, our friend in Macau, he has the following to say about it. Some thoughts on Jimmy Carter. His administration cut the defense budget, allowed travel to Cuba. He tried to put in place a complete troop withdrawal from South Korea, tried to decriminalize the possession of small amounts of marijuana, met with Brezhnev, and signed the SALT II missile treaty. He started talks with Hanoi to normalize relations, established official diplomatic relations with China, pushed for a creation of a Palestinian state, among other milestones. So may the gods be with you, President Carter. May you live in eternity with your lovely wife.
Well, not all of those claims are accurate, as people who watched the Chris Hedges interview will testify. But yes, may God have mercy on the late James Earl Carter.
Well, what Chris Hedges said, there's a difference between President Carter and ex-President Carter. I think that's the...
Yeah, that's right. Well, look, we better get on. I'll take you for chips if there's any chip shops open on New Year's Day after this call. Paul in Brighton on UK MPs. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I mean, just listening to you and Gayatri there, George. Happy New Year to you both. You should be both proud of yourself. Bring the show to the world, really. You both are inspiration, so hopefully you enjoy your chips if you find a chip shop. The thing I can't work out,
George... find a chip shop open.
Well, God willing you will, but how can Starmer sleep at night? How can these MPs in England from the Liberal Democrats, the Green Party, the Conservatives, how do they sleep at night when they get paid monthly? Every month they get their wages. Every month without fail. And they're bringing our country to its knees. Where is King? Where's the King? Hasn't turned up once.
Where is the King? No, that's a brilliant note to end on, Paul. Where is the King? I think the time has come for the Workers' Party policy of a referendum on the continuation of the monarchy. That time has come. He's got cancer. He may not live all that much longer. I don't wish him death, of course. But upon his demise, it would be entirely wrong to continue the entire show business as usual. And it is big, big, big business. They are making a fortune, the royal family, out of a taxpayer base that is being driven into cold and penury. And they show no signs at all of empathizing with that. And all of that traditional argument for ending the monarchy would be enough, in my view. But we've got an additional there. Her Majesty the Queen never interfered in British politics, never interfered, never showed any partiality on the great issues of the day, because she had the wisdom to know that the whole show, and it is really smoke and mirrors, isn't it? The whole show rests on the monarch being above the fray, the monarch being above matters of everyday political controversy, but not Charles. Charles is deep into. Today, he was visiting the Ukrainian forces, being trained by British soldiers, oblivious to or despite knowing that vast numbers of the British people totally reject and resent spending our money that could have been spent on keeping old people warm on Zelensky's totally futile refusal to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. But no, Charles was there, right there, placing the crown on top of the British government's really self-defeating, self-harming policy towards Russia and Ukraine. And when he's not doing that, he's praising Klaus Schwab and the WEF. I could picture, I don't know if you can, King Charles sitting down to a great big bowl of insects and supping them whilst telling the rest of us that we will have nothing and we will be happy. I believe the time has come to end this Ruritarian fairy story, for that is what it is, that this family was somehow anointed by somebody to rule over us forever and ever and take home a big, largely tax-free whack in return. Well, not for me. I'll continue to fight for a referendum on the ending of the monarchy, and I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to say that. And a big thanks and Happy New Year to you and to all of the callers, especially those that didn't get through, everyone who's watched tonight or will watch the show in the hours and days to come. Gayatri and me will be back on Sunday live with the next edition of the mother of all talk shows. Millions, scores of millions have watched MOATS over 2024. Let's keep it going throughout 2025. Bring another viewer with you. Why don't you? See you Sunday, God willing.